In this series of videos that I call the scientific foundations of the semantic worldview, we began with fundamental problems in logic and mathematics, namely, that logic and mathematics assume a three-world model called the Platonic world, the mental world, and the material world. And word sometimes means something in the Platonic world, sometimes in the mental world, and sometimes something in the material world. However, logic and mathematics cannot deal with these three worlds. They can only deal with one world. We then talked about how the three worlds are not separate realms, but aspects of each thing. Since logic and mathematics cannot deal with these three realms, but these realms are aspects of each thing, therefore logic and mathematics cannot deal with anything completely. We connected this to Gödel's incompleteness, where objectification and quantification are inadequate to model the world. We use this foundation to establish the necessity of three-mode thinking in Sankhya, in which the world is described as symbols of meaning. A symbol combines three worlds into a single world. I call this semantic thinking. We then explored three theories in physics called quantum mechanics, general relativity, and thermodynamics, and illustrated their contradictions. Each theory is incomplete, and each theory uses contradictory assumptions. Therefore, we can never combine the theories, nor can we individually complete any of these theories. By this process, we established the role of Gödel's incompleteness in physics. We then applied our semantic solution to this problem in physics and showed that it accepts all the observations and rejects all the physical explanations. Then we went on to construct an overarching picture of semantic science, and using it, we constructed an alternative vision of space and time. Based on that, we talked about an alternative cosmology. We have now come to the end of this series. It has thus far 11 videos, and this is the 12th video. In this video, we will try to summarize the differences between semantic science and physical science. These differences pertain to how we think of reality. Since we began with logic, where each thing is just one thing, I will begin the summary by talking about a perspective way of looking at reality, in which each thing is six different things. We have earlier talked about the six aspects of persons, but we will now extend this to the Vedic system of philosophy, in which the same thing is looked at from six different perspectives, and each perspective becomes a different system of philosophy. This perspective thinking changes logic because the whole is six parts, but neither of the parts are the whole. The whole part entanglement then changes how we add and subtract things. Finally, the process of adding and subtracting parts changes the whole of science. The perspective way of conceiving reality is mostly alien to Western thinking, but there is one exception to this rule. That is Edward de Bono. He articulated a perspective method of looking at reality. He called it six hat thinking, in which each person puts on a different color hat to think differently. Each person can wear six different hats, but they cannot wear it simultaneously. Therefore, what you say with a black hat doesn't fully apply to what you say with a white hat on. Both are true, but neither is universal truth. When universalism collapses, then everything in Western thinking collapses with it. Out goes logic, mathematics, physics, and every other type of science built on the idea that we can look at reality from a universalist perspective. So we will begin with Edward de Bono's six hat thinking and then connect it to the six philosophical systems in the Vedic thinking. We will then contrast them to the dominant modern Western thinking. We will repeat this pattern of Vedic thinking versus Western thinking throughout this video and try to summarize the major differences. At the end, we will see that these two have nothing in common. The lesson is therefore simple. If we want to solve the problems created by Western thinking, then we have to completely abandon it. It is not a change to some bells and whistles. It is a change to everything foundational and fundamental. I don't think people are ready to do that. I'm not even hoping that they will. I'm just saying that it is absolutely necessary to solve the problems. Edward de Bono applied his six hat thinking to business problems, so we will do the same here. We begin with the current situation, which presents a problem for us. If there is no problem, then we don't need to think. Thinking is prompted by a problem. For example, we can talk about the problem of poverty and hunger. We consider it a problem, although we haven't yet examined the problem in great detail. The next step in thinking about the problem is to present a desired outcome. For example, we can say that the world should be rid of poverty and hunger. When everyone has enough to eat and don't have to live in destitution, then we can say that the problem of hunger and poverty has been solved. Then the question arises, even as there is a problem to be solved, why is it my problem? Why can't someone else work on the problem and make it their problem? Why should I make world's hunger and poverty my problem? This is where the role of emotion comes in. Some people are affected by the problem of hunger and poverty, while others are not. Some will try to solve the problems, others will not. In a professional job, the problem becomes some people's problem because they are assigned that problem. If they don't solve it, they will lose their job. When the problem is assigned, then a person feels anxious. If not for the problem, then for that problem being their problem. This is when they start analyzing the problem in greater detail. Yes, poverty and hunger may be problems, but what are the causes? Is there a short supply of food, or is it a distribution problem? Is the cause of poverty natural circumstances, or has it been created by selfish people? In this way, when the problem becomes our problem, then we start analyzing it in great detail. We collect the details and facts as the preliminary step to solve the problem. Once these details are known, then we start talking about the possible solution pathways. If the cause of food shortage is distribution, then we have to solve the distribution problems. If the cause of food shortage is production problems, then we have to solve food production problems. If the causes of poverty is greed of a few selfish people, then we have to solve that problem. But if the cause of poverty is economic system, then we have to solve the problems of the economic system. Thus we arrive at the solution pathways. However, there are risks in these pathways to be analyzed as well. We might think about curtailing human greed, but the risk is that the greedy will subvert the process of greed reduction. We might think of increasing the production, but there may be technical risks with the proposed method of increasing production. The solution will not be successful unless we apply the risk based thinking to the solution. Thus, Edward de Bono described six stages of solving a problem, each of which requires a different way of thinking. Each type of thinking taps into a different facet of a person, and all those facets have to be used to solve the problem. If we don't perceive a problem, or we don't paint the desired outcome, or we think it is not our problem, or we don't gather the facts of the situation, or we don't construct possible pathways to solution, or we don't understand the risks in the proposed pathways, then we will not be able to solve the problem. At each of these six steps, we get closer and closer to a solution. Hence, each step is necessary. However, only the combination of the six steps is sufficient. Thus, we have six causes, each of which is necessary, but none of them is sufficient by itself. We need all the 6 steps for a solution. Now we can contrast this 6-step thinking to modern scientific thinking, in which something is a cause if it is both necessary and sufficient. If one cause is not sufficient, then it is not a cause. We will discard that cause and look for another necessary and sufficient cause. We will iterate one by one with various causes, and we will find that they are necessary but not sufficient. In this way, we will discard all the causes because none of them are necessary and sufficient. Thereby, all our causal thinking will be incomplete. But if we want a complete solution, then we have to talk about 6 different ways of thinking. They are mutually contradictory ways of thinking, but they are equally necessary and collectively sufficient. Hence, the necessary and sufficient solution involves 6 contradictory approaches. Modern science cannot reconcile these 6 contradictory causes into one framework because logic is designed to treat something as a cause only if it is necessary and sufficient. When 6 things are necessary, neither of those things are sufficient, but all 6 are collectively sufficient, and these 6 things are mutually contradictory, then we have to begin by throwing away logic. Edward de Bono's solution can never be formalized in current scientific or logical thinking. That is one reason why it has not received as much attention as it deserves. People want one necessary and sufficient cause that will solve all the problems. They model a human as an object, which is just facts and not problems, desired outcomes, feelings, many possibilities, and many risks. By reducing a human to facts, science eliminates the possibility of ever finding a solution. To understand the sixfold thinking, we have to replace objects with persons. Each person is itself a problem. We can call that the problem of life. That is, some people are hungry, others are poor, some are sick, and others are bored, frustrated, or disappointed. Therefore, life is a problem. Each person comes up with an intended state that will solve the problem of life. They might want wealth, food, health, entertainment, hopefulness, etc. They don't look at it in a detached manner because it is their life and hence their problem. It is not for someone else to solve. They have to solve their life problems themselves. Blaming the problem on someone else will not fix it because others might not treat someone else's life problems as their own. To begin solving the problem, they have to analyze the facts of the matter. What is causing their hunger, poverty, sickness, boredom, frustration, or disappointment? By such analysis, they are able to lay down potential pathways to the solution, which they then have to act upon. While acting, they cannot forget their current situation, the environment in which they are operating, the relationships they have to consider, and how the present condition might hinder the implementation of the solution. They have to consider all these to find a viable solution. Thus, problem thinking is not different from person thinking because life is a problem. When we think of worldly problems, we use all the 6 faces of a person to solve the problem. But when our life itself becomes a problem, then we have to use all the 6 aspects of our personhood to solve that problem. All 6 are necessary, neither of the 6 is sufficient, but all 6 are collectively sufficient. No worldly problem or life problem can be solved by one-track scientific thinking because scientific thinking always tries to find one necessary and sufficient cause. The idea that there are 6 necessary causes that are individually insufficient and collectively sufficient has never entered logic, mathematics, physics, or any other scientific area of inquiry. The 6 facet thinking, however, has always been mainstream method of thinking in the Vedic system. It is embodied in the six systems of philosophy called Vedanta, Mimamsa, Yoga, Sankhya, Vaisheshika, and Nyaya. Each system of philosophy begins with one question and tries to answer it to the fullest. It doesn't claim to be the only question or only answer because it is understood that there are six questions and six answers, and each of the questions and the answers are necessary, and only the collection of these six questions and answers is sufficient. Therefore, when people study one system and think that they know everything, then they have misunderstood the nature of reality. Six causes are necessary and six causes are sufficient. It is not one, it is six. Vedanta is the study of the main problem. It begins by saying, Athato Brahma Jigyasa, which means let's inquire into the self. This is because even as everyone is undergoing many problems, they do not take them seriously. The situation is quite like saying that the world is hungry and poor, but that hunger and poverty remains out of focus for most people. Most people are preoccupied with irrelevant details and defocused from the main problem of life, namely that we are unhappy, disappointed, diseased, fearful, and so on. The knowledge of what will make us happy, fulfilled, healthy, content, and satisfied is the end of knowledge. Nothing more needs to be known if we know how to be happy, fulfilled, healthy, content, and satisfied. Therefore, unhappiness is the main problem and happiness is the main goal of life. Early on, Vedanta talks about how the innate state of the self is happy. We don't have to seek happiness outside. The self is already innately happy. The rest of the discussion is about what this innate state of happiness is like and how one has forgotten this happy state and taken to the self created unhappy state. This innate happy state is called dharma or nature. The unhappy adornment is called maya or illusion. The discussion of the innate state and the false adornment is the essence of Vedanta. Mimamsa then takes off from this analysis and says, going back to the innate state is the proposed solution. Our goal, intention, mission, ambition, and purpose in life is to live happily. Since this happy state is called our dharma or nature, therefore Mimamsa discusses the dharma of happy life, or what a happy person does and how he lives. However, in Mimamsa, the pursuit of happy life is confined to the present life. It includes the pursuit of material comforts to get happiness. It is what we would call a moral life within a society, family, country, and so on. Mimamsa is about how to build a successful country, society, family, and personal life. It is one take on the Vedanta position that getting a happy life is the goal of life. It is not the only answer as we can anticipate. When Mimamsa talks about the proposed solution to living a happy life, yoga rises to the occasion and says, yes, we want to live a happy life, but this life is temporary. We do want happiness, but happiness takes many forms, including happiness in human form, animal form, fish form, bird form, and so on. The topmost happiness is eternal happiness. Others are temporary. This eternal happiness, however, can only be obtained in the human form of life. Animals, fishes, birds, etc. cannot attain this perfection. The human form is also very rare. Hence, there is urgency right now to not worry about temporary happiness and make whatever sacrifices are required to attain permanent happiness. Yoga and Mimamsa both drive toward happiness, but Mimamsa drives toward material happiness and yoga towards eternal happiness. It is an unfortunate fact of present times that yoga has also become the method of attaining temporary material happiness. It is a misuse of yoga. Once the pursuit of eternal happiness is understood as the immediate urgent requirement, then comes the question, how are we going to attain it? What is the cause of the problem? What is preventing us from attaining the eternal state of happiness? That is the study of Sankhya. It encompasses the understanding of the body, senses, mind, intellect, ego, morality, and the unconscious. Each of these apply a constraint or limitation which restricts our freedom, and nobody can be happy if they are tied down by constraints. Sankhya is the deep analysis of the study of the problem, namely the constraints that are binding us down. The solution to the problem is given in Vaisheshika, which says, we cannot remove the senses, we have to change the senses. We cannot remove the mind, we have to change the mind. We cannot remove the intellect, the ego, or the moral sense. We have to change all of them. We cannot remove the unconscious, but we can change the unconscious. Thus, we get to the process of how change occurs. This is more properly what we call science at present. But remember that this science is driven by the problem of life, the desire to solve the problem of life, the pursuit of the eternal solution rather than a temporary solution, and a deep understanding of the multi-layered nature of the problem. Modern science is not dealing with the problem of life, the solution to the problem of life, the pursuit of the eternal solution, nor does it have a deep grasp of the problem itself. Science is the study of change without all these, and Vaisheshika is the study of change with all these. The solution simply says the world is meaning. Our senses, minds, intellects, ego, moralities, and the unconscious are meanings. By subjecting these to alternative meanings, the senses, mind, intellect, ego, morality, and the unconscious are transformed. The alternative meanings can be happy, and they will replace the unhappy meanings to change our life. Finally, Nyaya comes to the conversation and says, I will explain how change occurs scientifically. The world is indeed meaning, but how interactions between meanings change those meanings is a scientific process. We can call it semantic logic or semantic reasoning or semantic science. It studies the interactions between meanings and describes how meanings transform meanings. Nyaya is also important to avoid the pitfalls of meaning transformation. Each life and each person is unique. Everything doesn't work for everyone, but something works for everyone. For every unique problem of life, there is a unique solution. That solution is known if we understand what type of meaning is the problem and what kinds of meanings will become the solution. If we don't know the science of meaning interaction and transformation, then we might subject ourselves to the wrong kind of meaning, and instead of solving the problem, we might even worsen it. Thus, the six systems of philosophy take a sixfold approach to identifying the problem of life, the nature of the solution, the immediacy and urgency of the solution, a detailed analysis of the problem, method of solving the problem, and choosing a method that avoids the pitfalls of other solutions unique to a person. This is science of life, not just the science of matter. The differences between the six systems of philosophies can be understood by delving into their ontologies. The ontology in Vedanta is will. We willingly got into a problem and we can willingly get out of the problem. The ontology in Mimamsa is social duty, moral duty, national duty, family duty, and so on. We have to do duties to get happiness in this life. The ontology of yoga is eternal happiness. Social duties, family, national, moral duties, etc., will not give us eternal happiness. For that, we have to revive the innately happy nature of the self by a process. Understanding what is true happiness, which comes from the knowing of the self and being that purely happy self, is the study of happiness in yoga. The ontology in Sankhya is meaning that covers the self from the unconscious to the body and constrains the freedom of the self. The ontology in Vaisheshika is meaningful entities or words that can transform or change the coverings of the self. Finally, the ontology of Nyaya is the logic by which meanings interact with each other to cause change. However, these ontologies are not separate things. The person with a will is the fundamental ontology. That person can be moral or immoral. That person can be happy or unhappy. That person can be liberated or bounded. That person can be purifying or contaminating. That person can be rational or irrational. We are simply studying the different facets of a person. With this background, we can begin contrasting the Vedic system of thinking to modern thinking. I will do this in two stages. First, we will contrast Vedic thinking to the modern humanistic thinking that pervades society, business, commerce, politics, economics, psychology, and so on. Second, we will contrast Vedic thinking to the modern scientific thinking that pervades all natural, biological, logical, and mathematical sciences. The fact is that social and psychological thinking doesn't align with physical and mathematical thinking. The world is torn on a dualism in modern thinking. Therefore, there isn't one thing that we can call modern thinking. There are at least two broad strains, and we need to consider both these strains and contrast them to the Vedic system. Humanistic thinking begins by saying that life is beautiful and wonderful rather than a problem. Life may be a mystery or a secret to be discovered, but life is definitely not a problem. There is so much pleasure to be had, so many inventions to be made, so much to be discovered, and if life is lived for this pleasure, discovery, and invention, then there is no problem. Humanism is a contrast to religious thinking, especially Abrahamic religious thinking, where life is a curse from God, given to Adam and Eve and inherited by all their children. Humanism denies this curse and elevates life to a wonderful, entertaining, enjoyable experience. Live it while you can. Don't waste it on worrying about curses. In that process, humanistic thinking denies life itself as a problem. Everything else in humanistic thinking stems from this denial. Whatever problem of life exists is said to exist because people's freedom has been denied to them by the church, kings, and the elites. Therefore, the foundation of humanistic life is individual rights. Once a person gets rights, the immediate urgent necessity is the pursuit of ephemeral pleasure. That pleasure can be obtained in many ways, and each person can pursue the chosen type of meaningful work they wish to do to earn their pleasure. The worldly reality is the body, the mind is created by the body. There isn't a world of eternal happiness. The present life is all that we have, and it has to be lived to the fullest. Whatever hurdles are faced in this life can be solved by negotiation and bargaining and contracts. You can marry the person you want, choose the partner in life, belong to a chosen nation or society, determine the employer you want to work with. Find the best path to your happiness. Modern science goes two steps beyond humanistic thinking. Not only does it deny the existence of a problem, but it even denies the existence of purpose and meaning in life. Humanism allows for a person to choose the type of pleasure they want, decide the type of meaning they seek in life. But modern science denies even those two things. Moreover, humanism talks about individual rights as the foundation of society. But modern science says that things are just moving based on forces. The body is reduced to particles and their properties, and all bargaining, negotiation, and contractual thinking is replaced by axiomatic logical thinking. Some institution or individual will define the axioms for everyone. Mostly those with the power will do that. In that axiomatic thinking, there are particles, properties, and forces, and there is no meaning, purpose, or problem to be solved. Modern science therefore contradicts humanism, which is why there are strident opponents of modern science in the postmodernist academic realm. The postmodernists are humanists. They are opposed to science, although their opposition is not like those of religious people. Modern science has considerably constrained and denied the freedom to the postmodernist. Therefore, the postmodernist rallies against the oppressive tendencies of institutions to create axioms for society. They would like everyone to make their own axioms, choose their own purpose and meaning in life, although they agree with science that ultimately there is no meaning and purpose. Thus, the sixfold template is very useful to understand worldviews. If we do that analysis, then we can see how Western thinking is totally inverted to the Vedic thinking. Because in humanistic and scientific thinking, life is not a problem. Life is a limited problem in Abrahamic religions, but the solution to that problem is based on faith in some prophet rather than a scientific process of changing the senses, mind, intellect, ego, morality, and the unconscious. Even the modern scientific thinking is radically different from the Vedic system because reality is objects governed by axiomatic reasoning in modern science rather than persons with their five aspects. There is simply no genuine area of commonality. The differences are stark and the similarities are superficial and inconsequential. Any attempt to bridge these two will thus result in a failure. They are diametrically opposed in every conceivable way. It also means that those with Western thinking will find it hard to understand Vedic thinking. All their assumptions are rejected. Trying to mix them will produce so many contradictions that all attempts to mix will only produce conflicts in the person who is trying to mix them. We will now talk about the basic worldview assumptions of the West. This view is called naive realism in the West. It means that the world is just the way I see it. In short, I should trust my senses and the mind and assume that they are valuable resources for knowledge. Even if instruments are used to measure the world, they are designed to do what the senses might not do accurately. For example, instead of relying on the human judgment of color, we must rely on the measurement of frequency. Instead of deciding if something is hot by our touch, we must measure temperature by a thermometer. Even as this view of reality has been sometimes called naive, almost everyone in the West is basically a naive realist. It means that we are right about how we see the world for the most part. Instrument measurements are simply correcting us in the edges and corners where we might be going wrong. All critiques of naive realism have therefore been dismissed offhand as if they did not even merit a consideration. If you counter a modern philosopher on naive realism, he will respond by saying, obviously, an external world exists. It is that obvious to them. The situation has never been different in the history of Western civilization. Going back 2,500 years, there was a famous allegory of the men who have been imprisoned in a cave watching shadows on the wall. The shadows are the phenomena we see, and they are cast by a shadographist moving cutouts or moving his fingers on the walls of a prison. Personally, I think this allegory was given by Gnostic philosophers to question all that the Greeks were doing in the name of philosophy, namely, postulating substances governed by geometry. Since the allegory came from outside the mainstream Greek thinking, hence it was not taken seriously. If the allegory had been taken seriously, then people would have to ask, what I see is shadows and not reality. I don't know whether reality is caused by real things or by the cutouts of a shadographist. So, how can I even know the truth of what exists? All speculative knowledge of the external world would be utterly false. But this allegory was disregarded, and people kept marching on with the idea of philosophy as speculation on the nature of reality, creating axioms and postulates, and using logical reasoning to derive conclusions about reality. The simple fact is that a phenomena of a moving horse can be explained by a real moving horse or a cardboard cutout of the horse. When more than one explanation explains everything, but only one of those two guesses could be right, then what is the value in axiomatizing one of those? Even different axioms can explain the same phenomena equally well. This problem, however, was not recognized until the mid of 20th century in Western thinking. For 2500 years, people did not recognize that axiomatic thinking was so utterly flawed in deciding the truth. But even after this problem was recognized, philosophy simply changed its vocabulary to say that axioms about reality are models of reality instead of reality, and made no other changes to their approach. The same method of guesswork about reality continued and was given respectability by calling it the method of science. That fact that science was simply guesswork was never highlighted. This problem has been given extraordinary importance in Vedic thinking through the phenomena of dreams. We can see a real world during dreams, but it is not the real world. The world in our dreams is projected inside out. The external causality in the world we see during dreams is just imaginary. The real causality is inside the person's mind. This is why people sometimes go to a psychiatrist to discuss their dreams. The psychiatrist interprets their dreams to uncover the real causality in the mind, which was projected outwardly during a dream. For example, if a person is chased by a ghost in a dream, the psychiatrist might say that there is a real unknown problem that is chasing the dreamer in real life. He has tried to ignore the problem, but the problem keeps coming back. In that sense, the problem is a ghost because someone has not studied and solved it. But that ghostly problem keeps returning back again and again. Thus, dreams are analyzed to find the real cause within us. Then, what stops us from saying that the waking world is also like the dreaming world? And the real causation is within us, and the apparent causation that seems to happen externally is simply a projection of the internal causation. For example, the internal unsolved problem is projected outwardly as a ghost. So there is a real cause, and yet what we see is not the real cause. In this way, those who take dreams very seriously would counter naive realism of the ghost chasing a person. They will say that the ghost is an illusion, but there is a real cause. That would be anti naive realism. This anti naive realism is the standard position in the Vedic system, but it is never understood by the naive realists because they have never examined the problem of dreams. The naive realist postulates the existence of an external world that causes observable phenomena. He cannot know that reality behind the phenomena, but he insists that it exists. This is why reality is called metaphysics in Western philosophy, because physics is what you can observe and metaphysics is beyond what you can observe. But you want to guess what it is. Those guesses are never going to be true, but the West gave this guesswork a respectable name of science. This is because the West is absolutely committed to naive realism. As they will say, obviously a world exists. They cannot imagine that the world we see could be projected inside out, just like in a dream. Thereby, all causation is pushed out of the human, then objectified using instruments, and that objectified and quantified value is used to speculate on what the reality might be. This laughable method of guessing the truth has been the standard method in the West forever. However, in the Vedic system, that assumption of external world is challenged based on dreams. We know that a world can be projected inside out based on causation within us. So, just like a psychiatrist tries to uncover the internal causation, a scientist tries to uncover the internal causation that projects an external world. The virtue in this method is that we can actually find the internal cause if we introspect. If we have advanced techniques of uncovering the hidden truths within us, then we can truly know the cause. We are not methodologically forbidden from knowing the reality that causes the projection, unlike the Western postulate about an external reality, where it is methodologically impossible to know the truth by speculation. A massive difference resulting from the introspective method is that we can interrelate the truth, right, and good within us. For example, we might say that I have been neglecting a serious problem for a long time, which keeps haunting me again and again as a ghost. So, my experience of a ghost is caused by my neglect. If I had not neglected the problem, then it would not chase me and not make me afraid about its existence. My fear, my tendency to avoid it, and its persistent pursuit are all caused by my inaction. If I fix that, then the problem goes away. In this way, the ghost chasing me is the truth. My desire to avoid the fear of the unknown is the good, and examining or solving the neglected problem is the righteous thing to do. The truth, right, and good are closely integrated when I look for internal causes. But if I look for an external cause, then I get no justification for why the ghost chases me, and I don't get rid of the fear of the unknown. I just see a ghost which I consider to be the truth when it is also a projection of the inner reality. Then I construct theories about how the ghost moves, but all such speculative theories are worthless because they never hold me responsible for my dream. In every single speculative explanation, I will always blame the ghost chasing me rather than me neglecting and fearing the unknown. The hallmark of Western thinking is thus separating the truth, right, and good. The external world is the truth, but it has no right and no good. Right and good are our projections on the truth. They are subjective claims. They cannot be objective causes of something happening. Thus, epistemology is separated from ethics and aesthetics as subjects. Science has nothing to do with ethics or aesthetics. At most, they will be discussed in the philosophy department, and at worst, they will be totally disregarded. Whatever truth we conjure by this project must also be stripped of any value judgment or moral judgment. As we can see in the case of a ghost chasing a person in a dream, the entirety of such an explanation is nothing but a futile endeavor. By the postulate of an external reality, and then limiting the truth to the external reality, Western thinking has always separated it from the thinking of righteousness and goodness, which are subjectivized. No solution to the problem of many axioms explaining the same phenomena equally well has been found. At best, it remains a tentative and incomplete model of reality. But there is an adverse side effect of this objectification of the truth, namely, that individuals have no choice on the truth. It is either the case that something is so and so, or it is the case that it is not so and so. It cannot be so and so for one person and such for another person. If you see something in a dream and I don't have the same dream, then your dream can never be accepted as a reality for you. It will remain a hallucination for everyone. Even if you received a valuable lesson during a dream, it will not be accepted as objective truth. An objective truth is only that which the majority of people can see, assess, and confirm. If the majority doesn't confirm the truth of something, then the truth claims of the minority or the single person will be rejected. Effectively, now truth equals popularity. If a million people say something is true and 100 people say it is not true, then the million people are correct and the 100 people are wrong. There is no scenario in which both groups could be wrong or both groups could be right, although one group sees some of the truth while the other group sees other truths. Truth cannot be private and personal. It has to be public and objective, visible to everyone. This is indeed the method of the West. Science is that which is popularly held by the majority, and what the minority says is pseudoscience. The mainstream viewpoint is religion, and the minority viewpoint is paganism. The guy who talks the loudest is the truth teller, while the silent people are fools. The entirety of the Western culture is driven by one assumption, namely that there is an external world. If that assumption is false, then the whole worldview is false. That assumption is factually false. The truth is not one as in Western thinking. The truth is infinite. I can choose to see some of the infinite truths, and you can choose to see some of the other infinite truths. We might both be seeing the truth, although we are not seeing the same thing. We judge the truth by saying that it is eternal. If I am eternally comfortable with what I see, then my eternal acceptance of those things is my truth. Similarly, if you are eternally comfortable with what you see, then your eternal acceptance of those things is your truth. Truth is thus defined in the Vedic system by eternal acceptance or unchanging nature. You and I can choose our truths and become comfortable with them. If I never change my position, then I have truth. If you don't ever change your position, then you have truth. In this way, each one of us can have partial truths, but by our choice, we don't need to know more. Our truths are not congruent, and yet they are true. This is the position in the Vedic system. The whole truth in the Vedic system is infinite. Nobody can know the whole truth, and yet each person finds happiness in some truth and he decides to stick with it. Another person finds happiness in another truth and he decides to stick with it. Both are truth, but they are partial truths. If each person is happy with their partial truth, then they don't need to know the whole truth because they are already satisfied. Thus, the basic difference between Western and Vedic thinking comes down to truth being one versus truth being infinite. Knowing part of the infinite truth is knowing the truth. Knowing other parts of the infinite truth is also knowing the truth. Two truth knowers don't have to exclude each other from truth because truth is infinite rather than one. The doctrine of infinite truths thus becomes inclusive, whereas the doctrine of one truth becomes exclusive. The exclusivism of the truth exists in Western thinking, but not in the Vedic system. The basic difference between truth is one and truth is infinite plays a very essential role in different kinds of logic. When truth is one, then any other claim is automatically falsified. Truth therefore becomes exclusivist. For example, the word God could only have one meaning, which has to be the meaning given by one religion. Anyone else who thinks of God in a different way, which might be more pleasing to God, has no room for an exclusivist religion. There cannot be better or worse ideas of God in exclusivism. There is just one meaning of God. Other people who use the word differently to mean something else are outside the linguistic community itself. In logic, too, each word has to be assigned one meaning. Each thing has to be just one thing. All this follows from truth is one. Objectivity is nothing but the claim that for a word to represent truth, it must refer to one object. The reference of the word must be an object rather than an idea in my mind. Therefore, those things that are simply ideas in my mind and don't correspond to an externally identifiable object are meaningless words. For example, beauty can exist in millions of things, but we may have never seen one thing that is beauty itself. Therefore, beauty cannot be a scientific, rational, or logical concept. Similarly, the mind cannot be pointed to as an object. Therefore, either the word mind has to be reduced to some objects or it becomes a meaningless word. In this way, truth is one isn't the only problem. That one truth has to be an object is the further problem. In contrast, in the Vedic system, when I utter a word, I am always referring to an idea in me. Even if I am referring to something that is not my creation and lies outside my control, it is only my understanding or vision of that thing that lies in my mind that I can talk about. Even if I have something fully in my control and is my creation, it is always within me. Thus, a word always represents an idea in my mind. Even if I speak about God, I am talking about the idea of God in my mind. Even if I talk about how God looks, I am still talking about how I have seen him look. My claims might be true or false, but they are meaningful claims. The meaning of the claim pertains to the idea in the mind, and the truth of the claim pertains to intellect judging the idea relative to other ideas which are also in my mind. Thus, truth is nothing but coherence among many ideas in my mind. Truth is not established by correspondence, it is established by coherence. The coherent truth, however, can be a partial truth. It can remain coherent and yet partial. It can also grow to include more truths and yet remain coherent. Thus, coherent truth need not be the complete truth. In Western logic, the distinction between partial truth and whole truth doesn't exist. It is either true or false. It cannot be partially true or partially false. The distinction between partial truth and whole truth, however, exists in ordinary language. For example, during oath taking before a judge, a person says, I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. There is an acceptance that there are many truths and there are partial truths. But partial truth doesn't exist in logic or science. Something is either true or false, it cannot be partially true. Thus, Western science, logic, and philosophy are opposed even to common thinking, which most people don't realize. They think that because it exists in common thinking, therefore it is logical. The problem is that to admit a partial truth in logic, we have to say that it is a subjective understanding of something and not the whole reality. The whole reality can be infinite truths, and subjective truth can be one of those infinite truths. This entails the end of universalism because under universalism, truth is one. Truth cannot be infinite. Two people who have truth cannot disagree with each other because truth is just one. So they either have it or they don't have it. In this way, partial truths are denied in logic because truth is one and it is the universal truth. There are deeper implications of universalism, such as each thing is just one thing. Let's take an example. Suppose that there is an apple and two people are looking at it. One person looks at the shape and another person looks at the color. Each person has a partial truth and neither of them has the whole truth. What do we call these people? Are they true or not? In universalism, truth is a binary condition, either true or not. So, color and shape are partial truths, but universalism cannot accept something that is only partially true. Hence, both claims become false. Universalism cannot accommodate the infinity of truths. Therefore, if you say this is red and I say this is round, both of us are wrong. Only the statement this is apple is correct. This is because truth is universal. I cannot know a partial truth that you don't know. You cannot have a partial truth that I don't know. Both of us have to have the same truth, otherwise, one of us is false. Therefore, this is red and this is round are true only if red equals round. Otherwise, under universalism, two claims about one thing are not possible. One thing can only be one thing. Universalism is very dangerous because it says that anyone who has a partial idea is a false idea. There is no ladder of truth such that one person can know more than others, and therefore the person who says this is apple is truer than one who says this is red or this is round. Set theory tried to solve this problem but failed because apples can both be red and green. So you can make a set called apple in which you can include round and green, and then red apples will be excluded from the apple set. Similarly, I can make a set in which I include round and red, and then green apples will be excluded from the apple set. Therefore, some truth is always being denied by set theory. The denial of the truth then results in set theory paradoxes. Basically, the idea that truth is one or universalism is a patently false idea. But it has been upheld as the only type of truth in the West. It arose because truth was equated to geometry and arithmetic, where 2 plus 2 cannot be 4.01 or 3.95. It has to be precisely 4. No two opinions about 2 plus 2 are possible. We cannot say that 3.95 is a partial understanding of 4. Calling 2 plus 2 equal to 3.95 would be false. Therefore, when we begin with arithmetic, then we end up with one truth and universalism. Under that one truth universalism, there cannot be partial truths or better truths. Since everything is infinite truths, therefore logic just picks one out of the infinite truths and neglects the other truths. This is how logic becomes incomplete knowledge. If we try to complete it using set theory, then the solution works for specific objects but not for general concepts. So I can make a set of infinite truths about one thing, but I cannot use one concept for those infinite truths. For example, I can say that there is something that is red, round, and sweet, but I cannot call that an apple because apples can also be green, sour, and oblong. The ideal solution would be that appleness is different from its properties. That requires mental perception of appleness, stripped of its color, shape, size, and so on. So if the mind is admitted into logic, then logic should be fine. Then the mind can know the same thing in many ways and it becomes subjective knowledge. But if we want objective knowledge, then mind is out and one thing is only one truth, and that is incomplete. In contrast, in the Vedic system, everything is at least three things. Each of those three things is in turn three other things. Each of these three other things is at least three more things. In this way, everything is infinite things. It takes infinite time to know anything fully. Nobody knows everything about anything. It is just not possible because there are infinite truths. Everyone can know something about anything. That can be called a partial truth. It may be one of the three faces, one of the three subfaces, and so on. It is partial truth, not the whole truth. Two partial truths can be true, but they can also be better and worse truths. The more complete truth is better and the less complete truth is worse. Hence, we get better and worse truth in addition to true and false. Both true and false are infinite. For example, to say that apple is square is one type of false, and to say that apple is purple is another kind of false. Two false claims are not semantically identical. Similarly, two truths are not semantically identical. Thus, the simple idea that truth is one wreaks havoc everywhere, and the simple idea that truth is infinite works everywhere. Another common problem with universal truths is that opposites cannot be simultaneously true. For example, something can either be inside or outside. It cannot be neither inside nor outside. It cannot be both inside and outside. Thus, universal truth means one truth that is not admitting contradictory truths, and at least one of the contradictory truths must be true. The law of excluded middle says that the neither X nor not X category is forbidden. The law of non-contradiction says that both X and not X category is forbidden. This is again due to truth is one. For example, if there are multiple truths, then one of those truths could be that something is inside and the other truth could be that something is outside. If there were multiple truths, then one of those could be that something is not inside and the other truth could be that something is not outside. In this way, if we allowed multiple truths, then contradictory truths could be true without a contradiction because they could just be true for different observers. But universalism entails every observer must know the same truth and there is only one truth. Thus, one truth and universalism are logically identical to the Aristotelian laws of logic. There is just one truth about everything is the principle of identity. Contradictory claims cannot be true follows from just one truth. Mutually exclusionary truths cannot be true also follows from one truth. Hence, when Aristotle framed the three laws of logic, he was simply framing the ideology of universalism or one truth. However, universalism is immediately falsified when we think of the same thing as the thinker thinking thought. The thinker has the ideas within him. When he thinks, the ideas come out. But after the ideas come out, they have not ceased to exist within the thinker. So the idea is simultaneously outside and inside the thinker. However, the idea is neither inside thinking nor outside thinking. This is because one could think of other thoughts, so the thought is not innate to thinking itself. But since you can think of one specific thought, therefore the idea is not excluded from thinking. In this way, the thought is both inside and outside the thinker, but it is neither inside nor outside thinking. The truth is not one because four contradictory claims are true at once. If we just make one of the four claims, we know the truth, but not the whole truth. Similarly, to know the whole truth, we have to look at reality from four different perspectives, namely thinker with thought, thinker without thought, thinking one thought, and thinking another thought. The contradiction disappears when we can see the same thing from four perspectives. The contradiction appears when we try to reduce everything to universalism or just one perspective. One little known fact about Western epistemology is that despite the search for a method of knowledge for thousands of years, no such method has been found. The best known method is axiomatization and testing of the axioms. However, even if the axioms are verified by data, there could be another set of axioms equally verified by the same data. Similarly, there is no guarantee that the data that falsifies the axioms will be found. Thus, epistemology is a failed endeavor in Western thinking. The reason is that there are no universal axioms. Each person is the axiom for their experience, and their experience comes out from within. One can know those axioms by introspection to explain their observations, and change those axioms to change their experiences. The methods of knowing and changing the axioms are both available in Vedic epistemology. Therefore, Vedic epistemology is a successful endeavor. The basic problem of Western epistemology can be summarized by noting the outcomes of two major standing doctrines of knowledge called verification and falsification. The verification doctrine says that if we can find data that conforms to the axioms, then the axioms will be verified. This is false because the same observation can be explained by different axioms. Data does not verify the axioms, but can only falsify the axioms. However, there is no guarantee that the falsifying data will be found. That data may be present in other parts of the world, or it may be seen in phenomena that are outside the domain of a theory. For example, physics keeps psychological phenomena outside physics. So, if falsifying evidence was to be found in psychology, then physics will never use that evidence. In this way, neither verification confirming the axioms nor is falsification guaranteed to refute the axioms. Both methods fail. These two failures can be summarized in two sentences. First, the presence of evidence is not the evidence of presence. Second, the absence of evidence is not the evidence for absence. For example, in the allegory of the cavemen, one can make a theory that predicts that commanders on horses follow the foot soldiers. We can confirm this prediction by observing the shadows on the cave wall, when the shadows of commanders on horses follow the shadows of foot soldiers. But if those shadows are being cast by cardboard cutouts, then factually there are no horses, foot soldiers, or commanders. The confirmation of the prediction is not the verification of the axioms. Then again, if the order of the cardboard cutout is changed and horses come before the foot soldiers, still nothing is falsified because there are no commanders, horses, or foot soldiers. Thus, even if there is evidence, nothing is proven or disproven. Then again, we might not even get the counterfactual evidence to refute an axiom. This is the complete failure of epistemology. The real cause of this failure is that what we see is the byproduct of what is within us. Each person has something different within them. If we can find what that is within, then we can explain what we experience. Two people may see the same thing but for different reasons within, because the effect under determines the cause. However, the cause fully determines the effect. Unless we directly know the cause by introspection, we cannot explain the effect correctly. And that cause is unique for each individual, not common for all individuals. Hence, all axiomatization of causes is false for two reasons. First, the axioms cannot be universal, they are unique to each individual. Second, different axioms can explain the same effect equally well. Thus, each observer has to find the cause of their experience individually. There is no universal cause, and all axiomatic causes are false. Introspection reveals these causes. Therefore, introspection is the method of science. We don't know the truth by using microscopes and telescopes. We know the truth by digging within ourselves. If something is not understood, then we have to dig deeper. The capacity to dig deeper within exists in everyone, but everyone doesn't use it. Therefore, knowledge is not for everyone. It is confined to those who can dig deeper. In the Vedic system, thus, very few people are knowledgeable. It is those who dig deeper. Others may take some guidance from those who have dug deeper, if they can trust such people. However, if they are skeptical, then they have to dig deeper themselves. The process of digging deeper within can be summarized in two sentences. First, we dig deeper because we could not explain some experience with shallow digging. Second, once we find something deeper, then we can explain the previously explained phenomena in a new way. Ultimately, there is a limit to how deep we need to dig, and it is reached when we have dug into our unconscious. If the unconscious is fully understood, then complete explanation of the conscious experience is also obtained. Therefore, explanations can be revised over time as we dig deeper into the unconscious. But this process is not infinite, unlike the infinite process of speculating on axioms and having no guarantee of finding the falsifying data. All meditative techniques in the Vedic system and other Eastern systems of thinking have been designed to turn the consciousness inward into the deeper realities within. All meditative techniques are also designed to peel the layers of a person within one by one. This process of peeling the layers is sometimes called the purification of consciousness. It is like peeling an onion. As the layers are removed one by one, the deeper layer is seen. When all the deeper layers have been peeled, then we fully understand the causes of our experience. We can then teach others how to dig deeper and peel the layers of the onion one by one. No such meditative technique can be found in Western thinking because knowledge was either given by blind faith in scripture or by using telescopes and microscopes. The religious epistemology is blind faith, and the scientific epistemology is telescopes and microscopes. Both these are failed methods. The alternative method of meditating to discover the inner truth is a successful method. Therefore, by science we mean meditation or turning the consciousness inward to understand the deeper reality. It is not the epistemology of the West that focuses on looking outward. The inward looking consciousness is called antarmukhi, and the outward looking consciousness is called bahirmukhi. The bahirmukhi or outward looking consciousness method is rejected in the Vedic system. Greek philosophers separated epistemology, ontology, and logic as three separate subjects. They assumed that any epistemology will work with any ontology and any logic. This separation and assumption is false. The epistemology of outward looking consciousness is different from the epistemology of inward looking consciousness. Their ontologies are also different. Finally, their logic is also different. Factually, we cannot separate epistemology, ontology, and logic. They are tightly interrelated. Due to this presumed separation of epistemology, ontology, and logic, the understanding of Vedic philosophy has become very hard because people assume that they can continue using Western logic and epistemology to understand the Vedic system. The fact is that a new epistemology and a new logic is needed to understand a new ontology. When the ontology is the mind, then logic and epistemology are different as well. One easily discernible fact about Western epistemology is the separation of subjects studying different objects. There is no common foundation for natural sciences, mind sciences, social sciences, life sciences, logical sciences, and philosophy. Every subject operates as if the other subject doesn't exist. Over time, the subjects keep diverging from each other to a point that experts in different subjects can neither understand nor appreciate the other subjects, let alone unify them. Knowledge fragments into dozens of departments. The truth, right, and good are also separated and enter into conflict with each other. Conversely, the Vedic system of knowledge digs deeper into the observer and unifies all subjects because every subject is a different kind of experience and the common thing between them is the experiencer. The conflicts between the experiences are resolved by understanding the common ways in which the experiencer experiences. Finally, we come to the scientific differences. The differences here are easy to articulate, and we have discussed many of them in the earlier videos. Nevertheless, for the sake of completeness, we will try to cover them here once again. Let us discuss the scientific differences one by one. Let's start with the notion of the body. The body in modern science is an object and either separate from the mind or the cause of the mind. The body in Vedic system is produced from the mind and is therefore just like the thoughts produced by the mind. Modern science tries to dissolve the mind-body dualism but fails to do so because there is no logical or mathematical understanding of concepts. How can there be an understanding of mind without understanding of concepts? These concepts, as we have discussed, involve contradictory properties such as being both inside and outside other concepts and simultaneously being a space, dimension, and object. When the body is treated like thought, then the body is both inside the mind and outside the mind, quite like the thought is inside the mind and outside the mind. Since the mind is outside the body, therefore it mimics some properties of dualism, such as survival after the death of the body. However, since the mind is also inside the body during life, therefore things done to the body are also done to the mind while there is life. Thus, the property of the mind being inside the body is relevant during life, and the property of the mind being outside the body is relevant at the time of death. The Western system of reasoning uses axioms and logic, where axioms are universally true, and whatever is derived by the application of logic on axioms is also universally true. In practice, scientists have realized that no axiomatic system is able to model all of reality universally, and the reason is that axioms are always properties of some objects, such as numbers, space, time, matter, and so on. We cannot formulate axioms about concepts because concepts are both inside and outside other concepts, which violates Aristotelian logic. Similarly, we cannot formulate axioms about concepts because concepts are at once space, dimension, and object, and the same axioms are not universally true for space, dimension, and object. Thus, axiomatic reasoning applies only to objects if we use Aristotelian logic. It cannot be applied to concepts, and by extension, it cannot be applied to the mind. Similarly, axiomatic reasoning doesn't apply to persons. Any attempt to apply axiomatic reasoning to concepts, mind, or persons results in logical contradictions. The Aristotelian logical system came to be regarded as true because truth was equated to arithmetic and geometry, which were in turn modeled as objects. In this system of reasoning, the application of logic to axioms produces a linear pattern of deduction and gives us theorems. In contrast, the Vedic system uses a dialectical system of logic in which each person is the axiom. Since each person is unique, therefore there are infinite unique axioms. That person asks himself, "What am I?" The answer to that question is also given by the self in the act of self definition. For example, a person might say, "I am a father, a citizen of India, son of so and so, husband of such and such, employee of this and that, etc." If this answer is satisfactory, then the question is resolved and the answer becomes the new premise. Based on this new premise, a new set of questions arise. For example, the person can ask, "What should I do as an employee, as a citizen, father, husband, son, and so on?" If a satisfactory answer is found, then the next question arises. How should I do those things? If that is answered, then there are next level questions, such as why should I do something, where should I do something, when should I do something, and so on. Each question leads to a new answer, and if that answer is satisfactory, then the question is resolved. But if the answer is not satisfactory, then the person goes back to fundamental questions such as, what am I? In this way, logic for the Vedic system is premise, question, and answer. There is a choice in what kind of questions we ask ourselves. There is a choice in what kind of answers we give ourselves. There is a choice in whether we accept or reject the answers. There is a choice in whether we prioritize one question over another. There is a choice in whether we accept some answer partially or fully. There is a choice in whether we apply one answer to all situations or to a very specific set of situations. In this way, logic is not devoid of choices. Logic is the capacity to produce questions and answers and bear the consequences of previously made choices. If we have to summarize this logic, we can call it choice and responsibility. It is unique to each individual. We have talked about the differences in the ideas of space a few times before, but it is worth noting it again. Space is like an inverted tree because it is the byproduct of a person asking themselves various kinds of questions, accepting some answers while rejecting others. Each answer then leads to further questions. These questions produce many answers, some of which are accepted while others are rejected. An inverted tree is constructed by the succession of questions and answers. However, this inverted tree is not fixed because both questions and answers change. The answers that were satisfactory earlier do not remain satisfactory after some time. A person then goes back to the original questions and starts seeking answers all over again. The inverted tree is the representation of a person's current state of questions and answers. Since those questions and answers change over time, therefore the inverted tree evolves. Space is therefore not a fixed entity. It is an evolving inverted tree. Space is infinite dimensional, not just three dimensional, because there are infinite questions. Although those questions could be reduced to five canonical questions of what I am, where I am, when I am, how I am, and why I am. By the answer to these five questions, each person answers the sixth question of who I am. Their definition of the self changes, and space is nothing but the definition of the self. Space stops changing when the self identity or the answer to who I am is conclusively known and the answer is satisfactory. Time is similarly not linear but cyclical in the Vedic system. That is because time is constructed by the sequence of choices. Good choices lead to good times, which then lead to bad choices, which then lead to bad times, which then lead to good choices. This is a general pattern of choices rather than a fixed universal truth. Everyone can change this pattern of choices. Thereby, their time can be upward helical or downward helical. They can also make the time linearly progressive. Time is therefore not necessarily cyclical for an individual. However, the general pattern for the cosmos is cyclical because generally speaking, good choices lead to good times, which then lead to bad choices, which then lead to bad times, which then lead to good choices. Getting out of this cycle of good and bad and getting into the track of eternal progress is the goal of life. Time in Western thinking has always been conceived to be eternal progress. The present is supposed to be better than the past, and the future is expected to be even better than the present. This is generally and mostly false. Therefore, the idea of a linear time is also generally and mostly false. Finally, there are serious differences in cause effect thinking. Causality is open ended in Western thinking in the sense that one cause leads to another effect, which then becomes a cause for something else, and so on. No individual is thereby causally closed. But causality in Vedic thinking is closed loop. Every individual is causally closed. This is because the world is a possibility and choices convert that possibility into an actuality. Each choice has a consequence, which acts back on the person who made the choice to expand or contract their possibilities. Instead of cause and effect causality in Western thinking, there is cause, effect, and consequence causality in Vedic thinking. The consequence is responsible for the causal closure of causality. We have now come to the end of this series of videos where we discuss the scientific foundations of the Vedic worldview. We began with elementary problems in logic and mathematics, and we gradually developed it into an alternative worldview. We talked about its applications to the problems of physics. We talked about a six perspective method of looking at reality. Through these videos, we illustrated two things. First, that there is an alternative science which is far better because it integrates all subjects. Second, we also demonstrated how this alternative science goes against every single thing that has been considered true in Western thinking. People mostly think that something better would be incrementally different. But the problems of modern science are so fundamental that incremental approaches will not work. The Vedic system is therefore not an incremental improvement over Western thinking. It is a completely different paradigm. This paradigm was previously well known in India, but over the last 1,000 years or so, it has been obscured due to various historical reasons, including colonial rule. However, as a result of this obscuring of the Vedic system, most people today have started comparing the Vedic system to other religions and mythologies. Those with a little bit of modern education think that the Vedic system is primitive. This is why it is important to educate people about the problems of modern thinking and why they cannot be fixed incrementally. These are deep problems that will not be solved unless a paradigm shift occurs. The fact that the Vedic system has been obscured doesn't mean it is false or mythical. Its truth can be known by anyone who makes the effort to know it.